When intruders break into their house, this mom and daughter hide in a fortified panic room, but what the men want is inside that room. We start off with two women, Lydia and Meg, in a hurry. Meg's daughter, Sarah, is with them. They're late to their appointment with Evan. They get there, apologize to him, and go in. Meg looks out to the sky briefly before joining the others in the house. They're viewing a house. It's a very big house. It even has an elevator inside it. Evan says it's an emotional property, and I understand him because I'm tearing up thinking about how I'll never be able to afford a house like this. The women are having a talk now, and apparently it's Meg who wants the house. Lydia thinks she won't find any better than this, so she asks her to take it immediately. Meg says it's a fortune, and her daughter says it's not Barney's. She doesn't have to pay the price on the tag. Lydia tells her she can afford it. They go on to complete the viewing of the property, and Evan asks her what she does. She says she's going back to school, but apparently her husband, Steven Altman, is a big shot in pharmaceuticals, but they just got divorced. I guess she took half his money. Anyway, they step into a room and Meg notices that it's smaller than it should be. I've heard that one before. Evan says she's the first person to notice and leads them into a room with a false door entrance. It's called the Panic Room, which is the name of the movie. He's showing them around the Panic Room. It has a phone line not connected to the main house, so they can call the police without anyone cutting them off. It has surveillance monitors, its own ventilation system, a door made of thick steel that no one can pry open. All of that super safe stuff, but it makes Meg nervous. Just as Sarah comes and claims the room because of the cool things she's seeing, Evan shows them that the door has motion sensors like elevators, so it's not a hazard like the women think. So what do you think? Of course she bought the house. How else would we get to the Panic Room if she didn't? Next up, we see Meg and her daughter eating pizza on their first night in their new home. Meg seems worried about something and her daughter just tells her to forget about it. Anyway, they're now in a room talking and Meg says she forgot to set up her daughter's school tour, but Sarah says her dad did that already. She'll just take a cab and go meet him on Sunday. But of course, Meg is not letting her go on her own. She says she'll ride with her and insists in spite of her protests. She tells her she loves her, kisses her forehead, and turns to leave. But she says it's too dark, so Meg turns on a light. You're a grown woman now. You gotta learn how to sleep in the dark. Anyway, Meg now goes to unpack more boxes with a glass of wine in her hand. Then she later jumps in the bathtub and starts crying there. Relatable. And like we all do, she reaches out to her glass of wine in her time of distress. She later picks herself up and is trying to figure out the Panic Room using the manual. She gets confused and tired, so she just drops the book and goes to bed. This was me before every exam in high school. It's raining outside, but that doesn't stop some men from trying to get into the house. Their key doesn't open the door, so they go around back. Still can't get through though, so they climb up. Bro, how do you get robbed on your first day in your new home? What kind of luck do you have? The men find a way into the house and the security system alerts Meg, but she's fast asleep. She wakes up a few seconds later though, but she doesn't know anyone is in her house yet. One of the burglars, Burnham, is now going from room to room while Sarah is still turning on her bed. He goes and lets his partner in, and apparently his partner, Junior, brought company, Raul. And now we find out that these burglars didn't expect anybody to be in the house. Apparently, due to a 14-day escrow, Meg should actually not be in the house for another week, but here she is. And here the burglars are too, being recorded by the security cameras. By the way, Meg is actually supposed to be here. The idiot just messed up his calculations. He was counting 14 business days instead of just 14 days. But this idiot appears to know Meg pretty well. Burnham is scared that Meg's husband might show up, but Junior assures him that no one will because the couple are currently going through a divorce. He even tells us it's because the husband was having extracurricular affairs with a model. He and Raul think they can still go on with their operation, but Burnham doesn't really fancy that idea. By the way, the operation is stealing some $3 million that's in this house, but no one else knows about. He reminds Burnham of that, and tell me who wouldn't be convinced by $3 million. He immediately tells him to kill the phones, and they start tiptoeing up the stairs while Meg is easing herself on the toilet. She heads back to bed but is disturbed by the light from the Panic Room, so she goes to turn it off, and just then, she sees the men on the security monitors. She goes into panic mode right in the Panic Room. How fitting. She dashes straight to her daughter's room, grabs her, and they run straight into the elevator and go down while Junior is trying to get them. Then Sarah reminds her of the Panic Room, so they push the emergency stop button and it takes them up to the room, and they manage to run into the Panic Room before the guys get there. Junior is frustrated he got there too late, so he smashes the mirror and upturns the mattress. Meg's phone falls and we hear a beep. Meg tries to make a call in the Panic Room, but she hasn't hooked up the phone line, so it doesn't go through. Darn. The burglars are downstairs throwing blames around like a baseball, but Burnham assures them that she can't be in there calling the police because she couldn't have hooked up the phone lines this afternoon. He knows because the security company is where he works, and he checked the paperwork. While they're talking, they hear Meg's voice from the PA system. She tells them to leave because the police are on their way, but they quickly call her bluff. She wonders how they know the phone lines aren't hooked up, but she just tells them to take what they want and leave. But since they can't hear the burglars, Burnham gets a piece of paper and starts running to communicate with them. They say that what they want is in the Panic Room. Then she asks them what they know about the room, and they say they know more than she does. Meg just yells that they're not coming out, and she's not letting them in either, so they better just leave. Meanwhile, her daughter is teaching her how to set an little more threatening by infusing the F word into her vocabulary, but she doesn't do it right. That's funny. The guys say they'll let them go, but Meg says conversation's over. It doesn't make them happy, so they're arguing amongst themselves now. They're trying to figure out how to get into the panic room, and Burnham just straight up tells them they can't. He says he spent the last 12 years of his life building these rooms specifically to keep out people like them, so their only option is to get Meg and her daughter to come out. How is he going to manage that? Well, he says he's working on it, so let's see. Sarah's trying to comfort her mother, who seems a little claustrophobic. Then they look at the monitors and watch as the men lock them in the house. Sarah is now frantically searching through the boxes in the room when her mother tells her to calm down. She doesn't until her mother yells at her, and they hear pounding from below. Raul is downstairs hitting the ceiling with a sledgehammer, trying to break into the panic room from below. Burnham shows up and tells him it's futile because there's 3 inches of steel, but that doesn't stop Raul. He wants to find out for himself. Then suddenly, Burnham's eye catches something. Meanwhile, the ladies start shouting into the wall hoping a neighbor hears. But come on, no way this place isn't soundproof. Raul finally gets to the steel in the ceiling and gives up, so he and Junior join Burnham at work. I don't know what he's trying to do, but he has a bright light and a gas cylinder. He's now breaking through the walls with a hammer. After he does that, he drills a hole in the wall, and oh, he's trying to get some toxic gas in the air vents to force them out. That's cruel. But Burnham is not even the cruel one. He opens the gas only a little just to send them a message, but his partner tells him to open it up some more. He ignores them. Meg starts smelling the gas, so she tells Sarah to get down and goes to see about it. Just then, Raul pushes Burnham aside and opens the gas some more. Meg puts her nose up to the vents and she's hit by the gas, and she starts coughing. Mine are pretty smelly too. Sarah finds a hole and the ladies put their heads there to get some fresh air. Burnham is still telling the guys to cut back on the gas a little. If the ladies die or pass out, there'd be no way to get into the room. Burnham is telling Raul to turn it down, and even Junior agrees. But Raul doesn't listen. Meanwhile, Meg is heroically trying to block the air vents with duct tape. She thinks she has succeeded, but the velocity of the gas is just too strong for the tape. Why do I feel like Albert Einstein after using that word? Anyway, she comes up with another idea, a crazy one this time. While the men are arguing yet again, she takes a lighter, opens the vents, puts her hand as far in as it can go, and lights it up. Boom! Blue flames everywhere. But surprisingly, no one is hurt. Just some fire on Junior's shirt. That's all. Meg asks Sarah to promise her she won't ever do a thing like that again. She does, but we all know Sarah will do even worse things when she grows up. You can see it in her eyes. Anyway, Sarah manages to open a hole and she sees a neighbor's house. She now tries to get the person's attention using a flashlight. She's doing the SOS code she learned from the Titanic. Meanwhile, Raul and Junior go aside to talk separately. Raul wants a third of whatever's in the safe, and Junior agrees. Raul now starts talking about Burnham. He tells Junior he's a problem. Pot calling the kettle black, don't you think? Anyway, the neighbor whose attention the ladies have been trying to get finally wakes up and is now looking through his window, but they make the mistake of dropping the flashlight and choosing to shout instead. Their voices are drowned in the noise of the downpour outside. So he just closes his blinds and heads back to bed, back to square one. Now Meg has an idea. She remembers her cell phone is in the room, and she wants to take a dash for it because she noticed that Raul and Junior are in a really heated argument by the stairs. She hasn't even seen Burnham yet, and doesn't know where he is, but she's ready to risk it. But just before she opens the door, Sarah stops her. She just spotted Burnham, but then he got tired of hearing the other guys argue, so he intervenes and is walking down the stairs as he talks to them. This is Meg's chance. She dashes out and she takes the panic out of the room when she doesn't find her phone where she kept it. She looks around though, and finds it under the bed. The men are still deep in their argument, so it's cool. Cool until she tries to reach for the phone and mistakenly hits her lamp and it falls to the floor. Chaos. The loud sound it makes when it hits the ground alerts the guys, and they start running upstairs in slow-mo. But she manages to grab her phone just in time and dash back into the panic room and lock the door just as they enter the room. But now here's the thing. That cell phone she just risked her life to get has no signal, and Burnham explains that you can't call out from the panic room. But Meg is determined to find a way, and she seems to be succeeding from the way Burnham is frantically running down the stairs. There's something that wasn't cut off. The ladies are now joining wires together while Burnham heads to the basement, but she's faster than him. She gets through to 911 and gives her address, but then they ask her to hold. She doesn't have time though, so she hangs up and calls her ex-husband on her daughter's advice. But guess what? It's the side chick who picks up and wastes valuable time. By the time she hands the phone over to Steven, it was already too late. Before Meg could tell him what exactly the problem was, Raul had destroyed the phone lines, so she was cut off, back to ground zero yet again. But Meg believes that Steven will call the police or do something. He heard there's trouble. He'll do something for sure. But Sarah thinks the side chick won't let him. We'll see who's right. But right now, they have another problem on their hands. Sarah is dizzy and hungry. Relatable. They need to get her blood sugar back up, so she's looking for some candy or something, but there's nothing. The panic room didn't make provisions for this type of panic. And no, she's not just hangry. She's got diabetes. Anyway, Junior has had enough now. He's giving up. He says he'll make an anonymous phone call on Monday. They'll find the floor safe and he'll inherit. You see, he's actually the previous owner's grandson. Then he goes on to mumble some names and how he'll still get 8 or 900 grand after a 60% inheritance tax, and that grabs Burnham's attention. He ignores the money Junior is handing to him and tells him to repeat what he just said. Burnham and Raul figure out that the money in the safe is more than he told them. Burnham Burnham pushes to find out how much exactly there is, but Junior doesn't say anything. He just tells him there's indeed more, but he's done for real now, so he's heading for the door. Originally, he didn't want to have to split the money with his extended family, but now he doesn't care. Burnham tells him he and Raul will open the safe and split the money 2 ways if he leaves. He threatens him too. He says if the police show up at their door, they'd know he sent them, and they'd find him and clap him. But Raul is a man of few words. He wants to do the clapping now, not in the future. So while Burnham is doing the threatening and Junior opens the door and turns to leave, Raul claps him in the head with his sniper. But he's not satisfied with that, so he drags his body back inside and shoots him a second time. Meg reacts to this by telling her daughter to go to the corner, shut her eyes, and not turn around. Burnham is in shock, by the way, and he even gets even more shocked when he sees a man at the door. Raul drags him into the house and orders Burnham to lock the doors. He tries to run away, but Raul doesn't let him. He didn't need to say it, but he's the captain now. Things are about to take a more interesting turn though, as we now find out that Meg was right about her husband. That man right there is Stephen Altman, Meg's ex-husband. He came, but he says he didn't call the police. Now Raul points the gun at Burnham and asks him to come up with an idea to get into the panic room or he'll clap him. He should have known Raul was a true criminal when we saw that he was the only one who showed up with a mask on. He came fully prepared. Anyway, Burnham finally gets an idea under duress. The idea is to torture Stephen in front of them and force them to intervene. Raul is really going at it, beating the shit out of Stephen, but Stephen is trying to be a martyr. He's still telling the ladies not to open the door. Burnham tells Raul to calm down with the beating, but he doesn't seem like he will. Burnham throws his jacket over the security camera, and at about that time, Sarah's watch starts beeping and she starts shaking. Meg is just there trying to help her daughter get through it. Meanwhile, Burnham had to come up with another brilliant plan. When he covered the cameras, he put Raul's mask over Stephen's face and made them exchange coats. He then dragged Stephen to a room and put him on a chair while Raul made his way to her bedroom and laid on the bed with his head facing down. Meg then comes out of the panic room to get her daughter's shots. She sees Raul but just automatically thinks it's Stephen because of the code, so she leaves him there and runs out to go get Sarah's shot from the fridge. That plan gives Burnham the opportunity to make his way into the panic room easily. Now Raul wants to clap Meg. I wonder why. But she makes a run for it and pushes Raul aside and runs straight for the panic room. But he quickly catches up with her and stops her from getting in. He throws her aside and gets in instead. Then Burnham shuts the door, but just before it closes, Meg manages to slide Sarah's medication in. But more interestingly, Raul's hand was caught in the door. Now he's whimpering like a little kid. But here's the thing, Burnham says he can't open the door because Meg has his gun. But Meg actually didn't. She heard that and went to look for the gun. Now she has it. She and Burnham are now communicating via the PA system. She says she needs to give Sarah her shot, but he's scared she'll shoot them if he opens the door. So she tells him to give her the shot himself. He heads over to Sarah and asks her if she can give herself the shot. She says no. He then asks her what happens if she doesn't get the shot. She says coma, then death. Sounds good to me. You can tell he doesn't want that on his conscience, but Meg is not letting him make the decision. She starts banging on the door and it's causing incredible pain to Raul, whose hand is still caught in there. So Burnham tells her to drop the gun by the door and go downstairs, then he'll open the door. She runs downstairs with the gun, but Burnham opens the door anyway, so she starts running back up, but he closes it again before she gets there. Raul now has his hand back, so he's threatening her. He tells her if she makes a move like that again, he'll kill Sarah. If she goes outside or he sees the cop show up, he'll clap her. Meg is terrified, but right now, all she's doing is begging them to just give her daughter the shot. Burnham gets to it. While he's giving her the medication, he's explaining that things weren't supposed to be like this. Nobody was supposed to be in the house. After he gives her the medication, she says, "Thanks, Burnham." She saw his name on his coveralls. Then he announces to Meg that he has given Sarah the medication, so she heads downstairs to meet Stephen, who can barely move. His arm is broken. While they're talking and Burnham is trying to open the safe, cops show up at the door. Apparently Stephen called them before he came, and this is the time they're showing up. How punctual. Meg goes to answer the door and puts up a performance deserving of an Oscar to send the policeman away. Even when the suspecting cop asks her to blink if she wanted to send a secret message, she leaves her eyes wide open. But you could tell he wasn't convinced, but he had to leave. She did that to save her daughter though. You can't blame her. But somehow Raul is still talking about clapping Sarah because she has seen his face. What kind of a man is this? Burnham gets back to work, drilling a hole into the safe while Meg takes a key and then a sledgehammer to break the security cameras. The men don't notice though, only Sarah does. But she seems too interested in that, so Raul notices that she's so focused on something and then looks at the screen. He's wondering why they didn't think to do that the entire time. Sarah now takes a few injections from her little pack and hides it behind her back. Meanwhile, Burnham is still drilling and Meg is still going from room to room, putting out lights and breaking mirrors. That's a lot of bad luck. Burnham now gets into the safe and sees bank bonds, the value of $22 million. They take it and are ready to leave. They come out of the panic room and they're finding out that all the lights are out and all the doors are locked. I have to point out that Burnham is still being kind in spite of all this. He first asks Sarah if she'll be okay, And then when they got to the place where there was a broken glass on the floor, he carried her so she wouldn't get hurt. Get you a man who can do both. Okay, maybe not break into a house, but you catch my drift. Anyway, the men and Sarah are now stealthily making their way down the stairs. When they get to the bottom of the stairs, Steven turns on his light and points his gun at Burnham. He asks that they let his daughter go while Sarah begs her dad not to clap him. Burnham agrees to let Sarah go, but Raul refuses to let go of her. So Meg comes from her room and takes a swing at him with the sledgehammer. That throws him straight downstairs. And immediately Burnham darts outside. But Raul is not dead yet. He climbs back up and tries to clap Meg. Steven tries to shoot at him, but he misses. Then Raul pushes him down. He then goes back over to Meg and tries to clap her, but Sarah jumps on him and stabs him multiple times with her injection. But that does nothing to tame the beast. He just flings her away. He picks up the sledgehammer and is about to clap Meg once and for all. But guess who comes to save the day? Burnham. He picks up the revolver, shoots Raul in the head, and makes his way out. Immediately, the police rush into the house, but Burnham doesn't escape. The cops catch him just when he's about to climb the fence. They demanded to see the palm of his hands, so he had to let go of the bonds he was holding. Everything he had sweated for, risked his life for, and even killed for over the last 2 hours, all gone with the wind. The look on his face says it all. Crime doesn't pay. Though it may pay some random stranger on the street who will pick up $22 million worth of bank bonds on their way to work in the morning. But definitely not Burnham, who's surely headed to jail. Now we see Meg and Sarah at a park sometime later. Sarah's looking at the section of the newspaper with homes available for rent or purchase. They're trying to pick a new home. Obviously, the one with the panic room did not exactly work out great for them. Well, they can come join me in my condo. I mean, we panic a lot here. We just don't have a room for it. Moral of the story? Diabetes.